Kenzie,
Spidey.
this is the new Findon Cricket Club podcast from the Hill End. Do you know who we're going to speak to, the first guest?
No, you've kept it a surprise. Come on.
So I've got this person standing outside waiting, and if I give you a few clues, I reckon you'll guess it.
Go for it.
This person is more round than upright.
Oh, no, it's not me.
No. Not a bowler.
Not a bowler. Okay.
Wore the captain's armband for the club.
Oh, first 11. Okay. So is first 11 captain?
Yeah.
Right. Narrowing it down. Go on. I need another clue.
Like to roll around in the field after every time he touched the ball.
Oh, it's David Goodman, isn't it?
David Goodman. So welcome everyone to the first edition of the Findon Cricket Club podcast from the Hill End. Findon! Hi, welcome. This is From the Hill End, the Findon CC podcast, with me, your host, Spider Nichols, and Mr. Simon Cairns, aka Pies. All right, Pies?
I'm all good, thank you, Spidey. Yep.
Good. Our first guest is a young gentleman named Mr. David Goodman, former First 11 captain and chairman. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Jason.
Dave, tell us how you joined Findon Cricket Club. What were your earliest memories of the club?
Well, we'd moved down from Hertfordshire in the late 60s, and I suppose by the age of 10 I was dead keen to join the club. My dad, Donald Goodman, used to work at Lloyds Bank Registrars, and there were a couple of Findon players, the most notable of whom is Alan Beach. And Alan was probably only in his early 20s at that stage, but suggested that I go to Findon. So my earliest recollection really is rolling up to Broadwater Green, to the net there, because we didn't have proper net facilities at Findon in those days, where Chris Green was junior manager. And I think in those days we probably only had one team. So I rolled up with my school buddy, John Rayfield, and we joined together. So that's got to be early 70s. I can't really put a year on it. And my earliest recollection of playing for the juniors would have been at Goring, when Simon Stoner and Keith Kirkham were at their height, well, certainly at an under 16 level anyway. And thereafter, I played regular junior cricket and made it into, I think, the second 11 on a Sunday, possibly third 11. My earliest recollection of first 11 was at Henfield in September 1973.
Who was captain of the first then?
Alan was captain that day, and I can remember people like, I think Peter Cole's keeping wicket that day. Alan Beach was playing as well, one or two others. But I remember vividly how the game ended because there was a thunderstorm. I didn't get a bowl, didn't get a bat, but caught Dave Silverson out.
Okay, well, Harris is famous for not giving you a bat or a bowl as a junior, as a youngster. Right, thanks for that, Dave. The whole essence of this, it's all about your favourite Findon 11 over your Findon career. So we've set you the task with coming up with a few cricketers that some people will know, some people won't. We're going to start with your opening batsman. So maybe you could talk us through your opening pair. Before we do that, heads or tails?
Tails.
Heads. So we'll bat. You could go in the field. So it's second innings. Okay. Who are your opening pairs, and tell us why?
Well, obviously I've played with a lot of opening batsmen over the course of my time at Findon. But I think the most exciting time was when I was captain from 87 to 91. And we had Peter Boyd with us, and invariably he would open with John Rogers. So that was always good to watch. But it was also the social aspect at that time too. As you will recall, after games we were always stayed together. Very few of us retired early, and inevitably there would have been a curry at the end of the evening. But I most remember, and I opened quite a bit with John as well. So it was really good to stand at the other end and watch him in flow. And
So if people had never seen John Rogers, describe what he was like as an opening batsman.
well, incredibly talented, had a great eye for the ball, but also could back it up with shot selection. And I think one of the most vivid memories is up here at Findon when we were playing a touring team that Gordon had organised to come to play at Findon, and we'd had a barbecue before the game. Findon batted first, and I went out with John to bat. No, I didn't. Kiwi went out with John to bat, and I umpired. So John was facing, and he was facing James Lamb, who used to play for Cookfield. So Rupert Robinson was the captain and wicketkeeper. He worked for Rothschilds in those days, a very posh fella, but a very nice fella. And James insisted that for the first ball of the match, he had a long off. So a bright, shiny cherry, and Rupert was rather taken aback, saying, well, really, James, no, he's got to be orthodox mid-off. But I know what I'm doing here. So in the end, they came to a compromise, and I think it was a deep mid-off rather than a long off on the line. And sure as eggs, first ball John received, half volley outside off stump, straight back over the bowler's head for 6 into the field. And Messrs Goodman and Boyd were giggling at the other end because we could see exactly what was going to happen. So that rather characterises John in my head.
So tell us more about Boydie as well, because I think a lot of people who are at the club now won't remember Peter Boyd. Can you remember the story behind him coming over here and what that was like?
The story relates to when John went to New Zealand and played for Papatoe, and they hooked up out there and obviously became great friends. And it was a reciprocal arrangement. So John went for a winter, met Pete, and they agreed that he would come over. So he joined us probably 80. I think it was 87. It was probably the first year I was skipper, actually. And he just threw himself into the club as Pete would. I mean, he was a great character, great social character, and I thought a pretty decent cricketer too. I mean, he could bat well, but his bowling used to surprise batsmen too. He was a bit quicker off the pitch than people remember. But he was just great to have in the team because he was a character, always had a word, always knew a story. And in the bar afterwards, just everybody sort of gathered around Kiwi.
I can remember this. We learnt a few new vocabulary items. And
yeah, and I think that when did we go to Exeter, the first tour?
I can't remember what I did yesterday, Dave.
That may well have been the second season he was here, 88.
Did he do 2 seasons of this, Peter?
He
Or was
did.
it 3?
He actually did 2 seasons, went back, and then came back again.
Yeah.
But I think he was only here for a year the second time round, I think. Yeah, so he was here for 2 years. So he became really part of the club and just fitted in, didn't he? And thoroughly enjoyed his cricket, played evening league as well. And actually in the close season, he played a couple of times for Knowles, the team I used to run on Sunday morning.
Football?
Yeah. So, and John did. So, yeah, he was a good sportsman and just a nice guy to be around.
Any stories about off-the-field incidents with Boydie?
Funnily enough, I was only looking at the scorecard for the 30th of April 1989, a game at Falking against Preston Nomads. And the day before, it was the Worthing Hockey Festival, and a few of the lads from Exeter were up. So I said to John and Pete, well, let's go out a few beers. They always gather at one of the hotels in the Steam, the Chatsworth. And it was a very decent night and we all got separated somehow. And Kiwi took my house keys
Was he staying at your house?
He was going to stay at my house. So he took my house keys, but never made it, because halfway home he went past the Gills in Howsham Road and dived into the back of Malcolm's car, which was open, and slept there for the night. So he didn't make it home. I didn't make it home either, and nor did Rogers. So we gathered everybody up in the morning and found Rogers ambling along the seafront at some hour of the day, mid-morning or something. And I was obviously captain at Nomad, so we needed to get going. So we went over there rather hungover. And John proceeded to hit 87, no problem at all, having had zero sleep and was probably still having a quiet beer even before the game, but that was him all over.
That sounds a bit like Rogers.
Yeah, a bit like Rogers on tour. No sleeping, but can still get runs.
Yeah, it didn't seem to
Every
bother,
game
it
he
didn't
played.
seem to bother him. But that was quite a fun evening. I seem to remember the funny side of it.
I'll never forget when Boydie was on tour and I can't remember where we were, but there was a woman police officer who walked into the pub and Boydie's just shouted, "Stripogram!" And honestly, she thought it was the biggest insult she'd ever heard. So he obviously realised he'd overstepped the mark and then sort of charmed her back. But it was,
He had the gift of the gab, didn't he?
yeah, very amusing.
Yeah, lots
So-
of Steinlager as well.
He did,
So,
yeah.
Dave, we've got your two openers,
Yep.
Boyd and Rogers, the terrible twins. Who's the umpire today? Who was your favourite umpire when you were playing for Findon?
I like Greeny being umpire. I like the way he approached the game. He knew the rules, but never really took it so seriously. And he was always good to have around. Played a lot of cricket with him, of course, as well. But as an umpire, I thought he was very straight. And would always let you know by visual expression when you were not doing things the way he would have done them, particularly as captain.
Were you ever a victim of his?
Oh, constantly. Yeah. But he was a good umpire, and he would stick in my mind.
He did a lot for the club, Greeny, over the years. Kenzie, you've probably got a lot of memories of every job that Greeny did, from groundsman
Well, yeah.
to...
Well, when I was working for him at the Excess, he would disappear on a Wednesday afternoon, and everyone knew where he was going. But he'd be on the roller up here. But as I say, yeah, as Davey says, as an umpire, he was kind of the sort of first 11 umpire, certainly on Sundays when I first started playing as a kid. And
How would you
you had to play properly, and you did everything in the right way.
How would you describe his dress sense?
Colourful is probably as good a word as any, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd say so.
Yeah.
He didn't conform to the traditional umpire wearing black trousers and...
Well, actually, his
white.
umpire's outfit was good. I mean, he was very smart.
I mean, everyone wore the old butcher's coats back in those days,
Yeah.
didn't they? So that he didn't always wear anything under. Didn't if it was hot.
Sorry?
He didn't
that's
wear a
right.
top underneath
No,
it, did he?
he didn't, no.
He would have it barely buttoned up, which
Yeah.
was quite off-putting. And still to this day, when you meet old players at games, a lot of people remember Findon for Greeny as in his umpiring days with his chattering teeth, and
I was going to say the false teeth would still come out even when he was umpiring.
yeah, they would clatter but yes, he was one of life's characters.
Great.
A grumpy one often, but a character.
Cool. Okay, Dave, we're going to go to your middle order. We've set you the task of 1 to 11. I think it makes sense to go openers, then the middle order. So
Okay.
who's your engine room in there?
Well, during my sort of formative Findon days, I played a lot in the second 11 and really enjoyed the Sunday second 11 because in those days you had great characters. And Belly was captain, Duffs was playing on a Sunday because he didn't play Saturdays, he worked, Mike Payne the same. So I put Steve in at middle order He could bat anywhere, frankly, Steve. In fact, for many years, he opened for the second 11 and did really well, I seem to remember, and played for a season for the first team. But he was a great character to be around. I always remember if we were bowling, the 10 minutes before we were due to start, Duffs and Payne would take each other on, throwing the ball as high as they possibly could, challenging the other to catch it. And woe betide if one of them dropped it.
I remember those days.
So they just made an impression. I was whatever age I was at that time, mid-teens perhaps, and they would always look after you. That's the thing. Very often, if you were travelling away games, you get a ride in a Jensen Interceptor or an E-Type Jag or something of that calibre. But yeah, I'll go with Duffs in the middle order.
Who else you got? We got 3 slots for middle
Yeah,
order.
I go Chris Bell, because Chris epitomises the cricket at Findon in those days. He played for a few years in the first 11, but then dropped down, took on second 11 captain, and did it for quite a long time, I seem to remember. But always made it fun, and he was good to play around. And as a cricketer, he was a decent player. He batted very nicely, could bowl decent leg spin. But socially afterwards, it was very, very strong up here in those days. And all the wives and girlfriends were involved as well, wherever the second 11 went. So I think I would definitely like to have Chris in that team.
I never played under Belly, but everyone sort of slightly older than me always says what a great captain he was. Was that just because people liked to play for him, or was it tactically, or was it just that
it was tactically? He knew the game well. I also played with his father Jerry for a while, and Jerry was a very accomplished player, and I think captained the twos for seasons or so. But Chris, was bright, intelligent, always looked for an opportunity to wheedle a batsman out. But what I also liked about him is he gave the youngsters an opportunity. If lads in their teams were picked, he'd make sure they'd get a game.
Because league cricket was so much different then, with sort of 20 overs from half 6. It meant that you had to dangle the carrot with a score that the opposition might want to chase. And then, in the last hour, you've often got to get batsmen out that, using a bit more guile and strategy than currently.
And in those days, of course, the draw was a legitimate result. And it was hard up here, particularly if you batted first and got a lot of runs and then got 6 or 7 down, wheedling the last 3 out. And very often it would end in a draw because we didn't really have too many quick bowlers in those days, and the wicket was easier to bat on. It wasn't as hard. It was difficult getting the ball past the bat, basically. So you're always relying on the batsman being tempted into a full shot, which is where I think Chris came into his own, because he would have had Ivor and Pete Chapman and people like that playing in those days that could tempt people out. But I just enjoyed playing with Chris. He was just a fun guy, easy to get on with, and it's a pity we don't see more of him.
Yeah, well, I did see him. Sadly, it was at a funeral recently, and I've pitched him the podcast, so I'm hoping that Belly will be coming to a
good choice
podcast near you soon. So, so you've got the Butcher, Belly as your 3 and 4. Who else you got?
Well, because I've picked a different wicketkeeper, I've gone for Nick Heyman, primarily a wicketkeeper, but also, he could bat anywhere really. But he joined Findon probably in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't quite know the connection, but his parents used to own Findon Place. But he was great fun to play with. Played the game quite seriously on the field, but off it was quite a comedian, really.
And tell me, so I'm fascinated with nicknames. Tell me about Haynan's Two Sheds. Why was he called Two Sheds?
I can only assume it was something to do with his size. And wasn't there a programme. Might it have been Play School or something where there was a character called Two Sheds in it? I don't know.
Right. Well, this
You'd
could
have
be
to-
an
you'd have
ongoing
to
thing.
verify
Why
that.
was Heyman called what he was? We can certainly come back
But,
to that.
you know, he didn't play. He probably only played for about 5 years or so, and he used to love going on tour as well. He loved to tour over to Kent.
He came back for the 150th. I seem to remember.
Yeah, he did, and he's been back once or twice for various funerals. He lives up north of Bath now, and he's chairman of the cricket club up there. And I think both of his sons play, so he's still well into cricket, but probably stopped playing a few years ago. But yeah, good character, another good character.
So that's your middle order, which is great. Tell us a bit about league cricket of those days when you were captaining the first team, Dave, because there seemed to be a good spirit in the Invitation League where teams would socialise after games. I think we've got into a bit of a rut where teams will play cricket and then often not stay in the bar. I think there was a kind of much different time then.
Yeah, I think the Invitation League was formed around 1977, and it was, you know, the formation was a group of clubs within Sussex whom we already played, and we jointly set up. We were founder members with 2 or 3 other clubs, so it was really just still playing the teams we were playing on a Saturday. It became known as the Pretty Grounds League, didn't it? And so us, Cookfield, Henfield, those sort of teams just got together and said, right, let's start the Invitation League, which we did. I can't remember too much. That's obviously going back a very long time. I think we played time cricket for most of it, but I do seem to remember when I was captain, so 87 onwards, we moved to 45 overs, straight win or lose, because we tended to bat second and chase.
So, certainly my time in the second 11, if we won the toss, we would bat, declare as soon as we got 200, and then however much time we had left, we'd try and bowl the opposition out. If we lost the toss, we'd get stuck in. We'd bat, get 200, declare as soon as we got 200, and then try and get the opposition out. And that was, but I think probably Findon had strength in depth that not many of the other sides had. The first 11 had a sort of slightly more competitive league, arguably, than the second 11, where we only probably had half a dozen sort of games that we could possibly lose in a season. Really, the rest was about whether we would win or draw.
I may have got that wrong. That rule may have come in much later, but I do seem to remember that we would always put the opposition in and chase.
Yeah.
So unless teams did a goring, which they did in 87 out here, and batted after tea for about 70 overs, more often than not we bowl them out and then chase down the runs. So I think actually we were still playing win, lose or draw, but I don't know when that changed. I just have a recollection that we just chased all the time. And when you got Rogers, Boyd, Briggs and people like that in your team, then everything was in reach, really.
Yeah. So am I right, Dave? You were the first captain, Findon first team captain to win the Invitation League?
That's correct. 90.
Yeah. Can you remember the season? Did it finish on the last game of the season, or had you won it early?
I can't remember, honestly.
I'm sure we'll...
But it would have been.
Research.
It would have been. I mean, obviously Goring were our great rivals then, so it probably was close-ish.
So that would have been Grenville Miller, Ribera, those sorts of guys, was it, around that time? Yeah.
Yeah, they were very strong. Jason Louis.
Yeah. Who went on to play for Sussex.
And they're back in our division this year, which is exciting.
Back in our division, yeah.
Right, well, Dave, we're going to move on because we wanted to keep the selection committee moving. So who's going to be your number 6 all-rounder?
I've gone for Gary Stevens, because, again, I played an awful lot of cricket with him over the years. And he was a great athlete. He was a very good opening bowler. Not particularly quick, but moved the ball. And possibly he was a better batsman, but never really got the recognition.
Or the opportunities, probably.
Well, because there were batsmen queuing up to bat, but because Gary could.
Well, you've got two openers. You had
Yeah.
two openers that were all rounders for starters, didn't you? There, so
that's
you're
right.
awash
Yeah.
with.
But also a damn good fielder. I mean, he had a great arm on him, and barely ever saw him drop a catch. But he was heartbeat of the club, along with many others at that time, and was always good to play with. And played quite a long time for us, actually. I'd also make a special mention for Charles Cruden, and I've slotted him in the all-rounder category because he was a great character to play with as well. And as a player, I mean, he was a bit of a long-handled merchant, but he could bowl.
Nothing wrong with that, JC.
Well, he reminded me of Tony Gregg, Charles Cruden.
Yeah.
And he always had a story to tell. He always had somewhere to be.
Yeah.
He'd always done something that week, which was really interesting. And I'm trying to think of the relationship with Josh, because I always think he was involved somehow along the lines. I can never remember.
Well, I think there's horses in his family, because eventually after he stopped being a lawyer, didn't he? He came out of the profession. And I think he had either a stables or a farm over Midhurst Way. And I think he ran horses regularly somewhere. We didn't see enough of him after he stopped playing cricket, and of course, sadly, died quite a few years ago, at a very young age.
Okay.
But yeah, special mention for Charles, because he was a good lad to play with.
Yeah. Let's move straight on to your wicket keeper, Dave. Who's got the gloves on?
Going to go for Martin Stewart, because he was one of the wicket keepers in the first 11 when I just started to get into senior cricket, and a very decent wicket keeper, not quite in the same class as, say, a Steve Briggs, but he was always a great trier. I remember when he actually broke his nose at Burgess Hill standing up to Greenie, and I think Greenie opened the bowling, and this was very early on, and he just got a top edge and it flew into his nose. But as a team member, he was just a ball of fun to be with. He was part of the sporting life brigade of Stuart, Bell, Gill, who would pick their horses on a Saturday afternoon.
Horses, greyhounds,
whatever move,
flies, going up a wall, anything. Yeah.
So just explain to everybody who might not know Martin that he worked in the industry, didn't he?
Yeah, he was Ryan Price's secretary when I joined, and I don't know how many years that was for, but eventually I think he moved to Hong Kong, where he was based for quite a long time. So we didn't really see much of him after that.
And just so for everyone's information, Ryan Price owned the stables before Josh Gifford did.
That's right. Yeah.
And obviously Martin was father of Mark Stewart, who was a great cricketer and who sadly passed away recently. So,
but Martin was a real gutsy player, and he would bat somewhere in the middle order. And I've seen him get good runs as well. But just brilliant fun to be with. One of many at that era. But yeah, fondly remembered.
Great. Talk to us about the social life then. Obviously, the clubhouse was slightly different maybe. The bar may not have been as big as it is now, but there was certainly plenty of people after games. And I remember away games would often take several pubs to get home.
Yeah. I don't remember too much about the old pavilion, really. I know we had the extension. I can't remember when that was opened. It's probably up on the wall somewhere, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And the bar used to be on an angle.
That's right.
And it was much smaller than the bar now. And yeah, it was well run. I think George Payne, Mike's dad, ran it for a while. I can't remember much about the quality of the beer, to be honest. And then we put the extension up, which probably was early 80s, I would think.
And what about things like teas? Teas were a big thing then?
Huge, yeah. Tea rota, one of the captain's tasks, to organise the tea rota before the start of the season. And yeah, we prided ourselves on a proper salad tea, usually followed by lots of cakes and sugary things.
And who were the supporters that would be on the periphery in those sorts of days? Does anyone ring a bell?
Not readily, no.
I'm thinking of the Ron Leggs, Dave Nichols.
Yeah, I guess there were lots of sort of ex-cricketers would still come up and support, wouldn't they? I can't think of too many back in the day supporters. I'm sure there were.
Cool. Okay, well, we're going to move on to your bowling attack, Dave. As a former captain, I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought.
A lot.
Yeah. Who have you got in your sort of slow bowling lineup?
Well, I've got the spin twins of Messrs. Gill and Harris. Malcolm was probably the best off spinner I played with. And that would be home and away. And that's how I would make that judgment. Because even on away, people would argue up here had the slope in his favour, and it did help to turn the ball. But he gave the ball a fair old rip. But it was on some of the flat tracks away from home, he would still be as effective, if not more so, because if he got a little bit more bounce, he certainly had a good loop on him. Great cavalier character to play with. Opened the batting on several occasions. I remember one match, one of the Sussex players, Benefit, might have been Pygott, where they managed to get Imran to come up and play a bit, and Imran opened the bowling that day from the hill end. So the Sussex captain, basically surrounded Malcolm, who was taking first ball. There must have been 7 slips, 2 gullies, short leg, and all the rest of it. In came Imran off his long run, and actually bowled. Malcolm went to play the shot, and the next thing we knew, the keeper had a ball in his gloves and was throwing up. So Imran didn't actually let go of a ball. The keeper had it already in his gloves, and because Malcolm was very bewildered as to what had
That's
happened.
great.
And then I think maybe there was an orange bowl for the next ball after that. But also, I think that was the same game Ajahini played. I think he guest starred for them. And I remember Malcolm taking quite a liking to Ajahini, hitting to all parts. So yeah, Malcolm was very, very talented cricketer, and another great character to play the game with. Alan, well, yeah, I mean he started off as an off spinner, would bowl a little bit at the same end as Malcolm, so perhaps he would bowl more on a Sunday because Gilly played on the Saturday generally only. But then converted into a leg spinner when Greeny retired and took on the mantle of leg spinner from the Rollin. So it just shows you how versatile he was. And loved to bat, would very often open the batting. Good captain. Was captain for many years, as we know. So
Yeah, there's a history of
I was
Findon.
fortunate to play in the same team as those two. To be honest.
Yeah, there's a history of Findon. Gilly, Harris, Howley. They put a lot of miles in over the years, and I think part of the project that we've got for this podcast is to keep those memories alive.
Yeah.
And we see Malcolm occasionally when he's not living in France, and it's great to speak to him and see him. And occasionally it's good when he comes up, and obviously Harris is up here as president. So hopefully we'll keep their memories alive.
Well, both life members, aren't they? So, yeah. So yes, always interesting to play cricket with them, and played it in the right way too. I think that's the point. They're a shining example to every young player that was coming through the club. That's the way you play it.
And they alternated the first 11 captaincy
They did,
over a period of
You'll
years.
see-
And see it on the board from 71 through to 87.
Actually,
so for a long time they were alternated. Did they just change just for a change, or
Well,
were
I
they
think-
a different style?
I think Malcolm may have been Alan's vice captain for 73, 74, but Alan broke his arm. So Malcolm ended up being captain.
Right.
And I think it coincided with quite a change in the club, because I seem to remember there were a lot of young players in the team, the likes of Scotty, Matt Beard were coming through. Alan Higgins was playing then, probably. And so we were quite a young team for a while. Alan, obviously, once he got fit again, came back in as captain from 1975 onwards.
I think he had a back operation in the early 80s, Harris. I think
Right.
that's why Gilly took over.
In the 80s
Because
as well.
literally Harris was
Gilly,
laid up.
Yeah.
Right, so Gilly sort of stepped in a couple of times. That would make sense.
Yeah. Actually, it was the 82-83 season, not the 73-74 that I was looking at.
Yeah.
When we had much younger team.
I did bump into Scott Towers the other week, which was twice in sort of 24 hours, which was quite amusing. And I'm sure he's going to be on our list of podcast guests very soon. Dave, what was your favourite away ground? Where did you like playing the most?
Well, I had two. Henfield being one, because it's where I made my first 11 debut in 73, as I mentioned. But also was the venue for one of the best games of cricket I played in. It was an Invitation League game at Henfield, late 80s. And we had, I think John had just come back from New Zealand, so it would have been Boydie's first season. We had a very strong batting lineup and made about 170, but we collapsed middle order because they had a slow left armer called Alistair Lowry, who was a Cornishman that went on to play for Worthing and did very well playing for Worthing. And I seem to remember we had Henfield in all sorts of trouble. Rogers was bowling quicker in those days and got 3 or 4 wickets very, very soon on a helpful wicket. But then Alistair came in and just took the game away for us. But I'm pretty sure it got down to the last few overs, and I seem to remember my not throwing the ball in. Malcolm was bowling the last over, and we managed to run the last pair out. It was a truly great game of cricket. My other favourite ground would be Cookfield. Fond memories there. Played a lot of cricket there against a really nice cricket club. Still got great friends, Gough Baker, 1 or 2 others that played at Cookfield in those days. And it always seemed to, the sun always seemed to shine there. The game was always competitive and good, and the afterwards was even better. So it just sort of sticks in the mind as being one of the, and very picturesque. And that was probably before they had the second pitch.
Yeah, just the one great,
Because you got that stately home in the background, haven't you? And it was a great place to play.
You come up here and watch cricket on a Saturday day. Do you feel that it's changed with regards to the friendships that you would have made with opposition, the friendships that you've made over the years in your own team? Or do you still see that with the current
I think when you talk to the current generation, they know players in other teams quite well. So clearly there is an element of camaraderie during and after the game of cricket. So it hasn't gone completely, but I don't think it's quite on the same scale as it once was, because I don't quite understand why people don't stay as long afterwards. But every player would probably stay from the opposition for at least an hour or possibly 2 hours after the game. So times change, priorities change, don't they? Families change. So we would very often have 7, 8, 9 players from Saturday play on a Sunday. Because it was just the way cricket was in those days.
There wasn't a huge amount to do, I seem to remember. As in B&Q wasn't a thing.
Or perhaps Sunday opening for supermarkets wasn't around in those days. But you just made time. If you wanted to play cricket, you made time.
And families were probably more involved with the club. I think you touched on that with teas. I think that's for me. That's one of the things, perhaps with teas not being such a thing anymore, is that means that wives and girlfriends aren't coming up a few times a year to do teas. Don't feel perhaps as involved. So
I think there was great involvement and encouragement for the ladies to be part of the club. And I'm not saying that's not true today. And clearly there are a lot of ladies still involved, but it was great on a Saturday having, and particularly on a Sunday, if we went to an away fixture somewhere nice ground on a Sunday, Nomads or Haywards Heath or something like that, we go as a group, and very often find a pub on the way, which is good. Special plug for my wife, Tina, who, as far as I know, might be the only tea lady to have done an away tea.
Interesting.
Away at Farnham.
Yeah.
And I remember the conversation with, it would have been Graham Thorpe's younger brother, might have been Alan Thorpe, who was very apologetic, said, "We've got all the bread, we've got all the contents, but we haven't got a tea lady to put it together." So Tina very kindly
well done, Tina.
Made the tea for everyone.
Excellent.
Scorer? Who were the scorers when you were in charge, Dave?
Well, I can go way back to Tudor. So Ted Sowry used to umpire, and Tudor used to be the scorer. Mar Hine on a Sunday.
Who was your first 11 scorer?
I think it might have been young Chewy for some of the time.
Matthew Duffield.
Yeah. I think he did.
Family of scorers. They all.
Well, of course, Anne as well.
Anne was a scorer, and then
Joanna
Joanna scored
seconds with
as a youngster as well.
Yeah, but Matthew, sticks in my mind as being one of the scorers. There must be others, but I'm afraid I can't think of them at this moment in time.
Okay, we're going to keep going. We've got 2 places to fill, David. We've got your 2 opening bowlers, or your quicks. If you're going to open.
Well, I go for a left arm round in the shape of Mr. Michael Payne. Again, part of that Bell Duffield era. Payne generally would play both days. I think he just about shut the garage on the Saturday to get up to Findon or wherever we were playing. Great competitor, always tried really hard. Pulled the most monstrous faces as he was running into the batsman, I seem to remember.
He had a big take. Did he have a big takeoff into the?
He almost sort of, it was a leap into the air.
So there was an amazing story when, talking of scorers, he scored on cricket tour, I seem to remember, and there was a lake nearby, and him and Boydie decided to share the scoring so Payne could go for a dip.
That would have been Showbrook Park.
That
was the first year we went to Devon.
And I seem to remember
Hutchbusters.
Yes, that's right, Dave. And I seem to remember Payne dropped down to his smalls, which were a little bit more see-through than the opposition's young lady scorer could handle. And I seem to remember she didn't know where to look.
Yeah, can imagine.
Nor did we come to that.
I can imagine.
Payne, he was done huge amounts for the club. He was secretary for
20 plus years, wasn't he? I took over from him.
And his dad played before him. He was heart and soul.
Mainly second 11, Payne, would he have been?
He played occasionally in the ones, but he was mainly second 11.
Very unusual, left arm round.
Very unusual, but he was a good bowler. He was a good bowler. Liked to have a bat as well. So he was good fun to be with. And my other opening quick would be Keith Biswell.
Yeah.
A little bit younger than myself. Probably he was around the Mike Metters, Stuart Leach time, joining the club. Parents lived down in the valley, but he was quite an underrated cricketer, was Keith. Bowled off the wrong foot, but used to get a great deal of swing by doing so. So much so he couldn't control it sometimes, and it was very difficult for people like Alan to set a field for it. I remember in a benefit game up here, he opened the bowling and he cleaned out Guillaume Mendes.
Good scout.
He didn't even get near it. But Keith, another character I do remember on cricket tour, he got very drunk pre a game at Northiam once, and I think tried to claim a catch at deep square leg where he virtually fell into the bushes, but swears blind that he caught it inside the rope. And that was the dangers of drinking at the 6 bells, probably Young's or something before the game. But Keith was and unfortunately we didn't really see a lot of him after about his mid-20s. I think he joined the civil service and moved up to London. Really don't know if his mum and dad are still around. His dad was a very keen supporter. He would always come up and watch. But Keith could bat as well. He was a good footballer, good athlete, and enjoyed playing with him.
Well, we've got to the end of the selection committee. Kenty, do you want to just kind of recap on the lineup?
Yeah, so we got Boyd and Rogers opening, followed by Duffield, Bell, Heynen, Gary Stevens filling the all-rounder slot, and Mark Stewart with the gloves. Martin Stewart, sorry. And then Gill and Harris, the spin twins, and Payne and Biswell providing the pace.
Yeah.
So you're still involved, Dave. You help with the ground, which we all appreciate, and you come up on a Saturday. And how do you feel that the state of the club is right now?
In a rude state of health. You've only got to look around and see the amount of people who are involved. Last Saturday morning, superstars.
The All-Stars.
Yeah,
39, was it? I think young under-8s.
Kids of all ages running around, and we've probably got half a dozen people helping there, and that just extends through the club. I mean, the committee's still very active and looking forward, and it's great that people remain involved, and I think it's the true strength of the club that people that have played the game here continue to help because you enjoy being here, you enjoy being part of a very successful, well-run club, and long may that continue.
Well, Dave, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome, Jason.
Ex-First 11 captain, ex-chairman, now life member. So I think you're an excellent guest for our first ever podcast. So
and tractor driver, Toro driver, if he had one to drive.
Great.
Thanks, David. Appreciate
You're welcome,
it.
chaps.
David, we'll see you soon.
You will.
Findon!